Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, the North Carolina Democrat Party hosted their yearly unity dinner in Raleigh. I suffered through all 2 hours, so you didn't have to. We'll have all the details coming up. And a good Monday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the program with you 24/7 on demand. It's completely free and real simple to do. Just search for the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app or visit the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. For any legal questions or challenges, reach out to Melissa Gott and her team, lawgroupnc.com. We'll hear more from them coming up as we roll through this very busy Monday edition of the Nick Craig Show. Well, hopefully you had a great weekend, enjoying a couple of days off. I spent a good chunk of my weekend watching the Democrat Party in North Carolina's annual unity dinner. It ran more than 2 hours, listening to Democrat after Democrat speak. I suffered through the chaos, suffered through the mayhem, so you didn't have to. And for all it was pretty boring. For the most part. I've got a couple of clips, a bunch from Governor Josh Stein, a couple from their keynote speaker in Senator Elizabeth Warren, the Democrat from Massachusetts. But all in all, for a party that this is supposed to be their year, for a party that is supposed to have an incredible election coming up in November, which, let me be perfectly clear, is still possible. It's a midterm election. The Republicans are in charge. All historical evidence would back up that 2026 should be a good year for Democrats. With that being said, for a party that seemingly has a lot of wind in its sails, heading in the right direction, it didn't seem like that during this unity dinner. Former Governor Roy Cooper spoke. Of course, he's running for the United States Senate. I didn't pull a single clip from him, not because I didn't want to listen to him, not because I didn't want you to have to listen to him, because it just wasn't interesting. He didn't say anything that isn't anything else that he's been saying now for months. There was no fire behind it. It was a relatively sleepy, no real passion in his voice. Surprisingly, the only one that had any really good quips was the current Democrat governor and Josh Stein. I've got a bunch of clips from him coming up. Most of the other speakers relatively boring. Elizabeth Warren droned on and on about airlines and lobbyists and money in politics, the same old shtick that she's been running with now for more than a decade. It just really wasn't that interesting. And it was kind of, I'll admit, I was not, have not been a frequent watcher of this event. I was just expecting something a little bit more high energy. The Democrat Party chairwoman, Anderson Clayton, who is normally posting expletives on social media, was promoting this thing like a wrestling announcer. She was yelling and screaming the entire event. No F-bombs, which I was a little surprised with. I guess she just saves that for some of her social media ramblings. So all in all, 2 hours of my life that I will not get back, and a relatively sleepy, kind of boring event outside of some very interesting comments from our current Democrat governor in Josh Stein. He opened up by saying that 2024, which obviously was not a good year for the Democrat Party, Donald Trump winning 7 of 7 swing states, including North Carolina, his third time carrying the state, 2016, 2020, and 2024. The Republicans keeping control in the United States House. Mike Johnson remains the speaker there, gaining a majority in the United States Senate, controlling both the House, Senate, and the executive branch. 2024, not a good year for the Democrat Party. And it's no surprise. Their candidate, who voters actually chose, was Joe Biden. He magically disappeared just 100 days before the election, and it was Kamala Harris, the failed vice president, that took his spot without a single Democrat in the nation voting for her to be the nominee. So it should be no surprise that it was a bad year. But Josh Stein said something very interesting in his opening. Take a listen to this.
But it wasn't just the governor's race that we ran or that we won. We held the important offices of Attorney General and Secretary of State, picked up the Lieutenant Governor and Superintendent of Public Instruction, won our only competitive congressional race, Don Davis, the seat that they are now trying to rig with their recent gerrymander, held serve in the state Senate under worse maps, broke the supermajority in the state House, and put Justice Allison Riggs back on the North Carolina Supreme Court. And that was in the face of one of the most brazen attempts by Republicans to steal an election that I have ever witnessed. But we did something more. We also gave people across this country hope on what was otherwise a dark night for this nation. North Carolina was a bright spot.
That is some of the most revisionist history that I have ever heard. If North Carolina, if you're a Democrat across the nation, and North Carolina is currently your quote-unquote, to quote the governor of North Carolina, a bright spot, the Democrat Party is in shambles. The governor has had 14 vetoes overridden since he took office in early 2025. The Republicans hold a supermajority in the North Carolina Senate. The Republicans are one vote shy of a supermajority in the House, and it hasn't mattered. 14 vetoes have been overridden by the North Carolina General Assembly. The Supreme Court, squarely controlled by Republicans. The appeals court, squarely held by Republicans. Republicans holding, 10 out of our 14 congressional seats across the state? If North Carolina is your bright spot as a Democrat, you are in terrible shape. And he highlights a couple things. Yes, Jeff Jackson is a Democrat. The governor himself and Josh Stein is a Democrat. DPI, Democrat. Sure. That's not to say that Republicans completely control the state. That's not true. But again, this revisionist history of a bright spot, maybe it's not revisionist history. Maybe 2024 was truly so bad for the Democrat Party that they look at North Carolina, in which President Trump won for his third time. Republicans contained and continued with their massive margins in the North Carolina General Assembly, being able to enact common sense, normal legislation like, sheriffs cooperating with immigration and customs enforcement, removing divisive, awful, evil DEI concepts from K through 12 public education, state government, the UNC system. These are all things that have happened in the bright spot for Democrats that the governor is talking about. Things that they absolutely disagree with. Protecting women in their sports, young females when they are participating in sports through middle, high school, and their college years. Making sure that parents have the ability to see truly what is going on in the classroom that their children are attending, the Parents' Bill of Rights. These are all things that Democrats fought tooth and nail against, which is fine. Those policies are stupid from their vantage point. They're on the wrong side of history. They absolutely disagree with all of this stuff, and all of that has been enacted here in North Carolina. So the idea here that North Carolina remains a bright spot for Democrats is truly astonishing. Oh, by the way, the state of North Carolina currently has 2 Republican senators, Tom Tillis and Ted Budd. If this is your shining light of Democrat success, if the Tar Heel state is your North Star, the Democrats are totally screwed. I don't have any other way to put it. And then a very interesting comment there from Stein that we'll get into in a little bit, that they tried cheating in the 2024 election. That's interesting. I've been told for the better part of a decade now that elections are safe and secure. I have been told for the better part of a decade that you can't rig an election, that would be impossible to do, that is a crazy right-wing tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. Yet, this is not the only time that Democrat Governor Josh Stein brought up the concept of Republicans stealing elections, a major a difference from what he and many other Democrats have been saying for more than a decade now. So some very interesting commentary there from Democrat Governor Josh Stein at the Democrat Party's Unity Dinner in Raleigh over the weekend. Continuing our coverage with this Unity Dinner, as I noted in the open there, a relatively sleepy event from my vantage point for Democrats. It ran about 2 hours. It included a bunch of different elected statewide officials and candidates, some of the higher level speakers, a former Democrat governor, now Senate candidate Roy Cooper, current Democrat Governor Josh Stein, and the big keynote address, Elizabeth Warren, the Democrat from Massachusetts. I have just a couple of clips from her coming up as we continue through the program. We just heard from the governor that North Carolina was a bright spot for Democrats in 2024, regardless of all of the GOP victories in this state, and making some interesting commentary about voting in North Carolina, that Republicans are attempting to steal elections. Some very interesting comments there. We'll come back to that. He then teed off a little bit on the Republican legislature, claiming that they're making North Carolina less safe. Well, that's interesting.
We are blessed to call this place our home. And when you love your home, you will fight for it, especially when times are tough. These are tough times here in Raleigh and across the nation. At the state level, the Republican General Assembly is pushing legislation that would make our state less safe and less strong. They want to authorize teenagers to carry around concealed weapons, not even requiring any safety training. They want to completely ban abortion with no exceptions. But because you all helped us to break the supermajority in the State House, neither of those bills are law today.
Well, I mean, there is no legislation that has been proposed, at least from my memory, this session to completely ban abortion. I don't know what he's referring to there. He's talking about Senate Bill 50 when he makes this claim, and it's so disingenuous. It's so dishonest. Teenagers! When you think of a teenager, what do you think? 13, 14, 15 years old? When he says teenagers, he's referring to those that are 18 years old enough to go and fight for the United States of America in the military. That's who he's referring to when he says teenagers. Traditionally, at least when I use that phrase, when I say, oh, a group of teenagers did something over the weekend, there was some teenager mass mob that took place like we've seen in a couple of our cities. We're talking about kids that are in middle and high school. And yes, you can be a senior in high school at 18 years old, depending on your age and when you joined. But that's traditionally not what many people think. But again, being disingenuous, being wrong on the wrong side of a bunch of issues is pretty much all the Democrat Party has. So it's no surprise there that the governor makes those comments. It is interesting, however, I'll note as he nags on the GOP there for making the state less safe. You can take a look at all of these blue cities across the state of North Carolina. Asheville, back about 3 weeks ago, there was another gang shooting, 2 people killed, 7 wounded. Asheville, of course, exclusively controlled by Democrats. Not a single Republican in elected office. It is a progressive liberal hellhole over there. People shooting up heroin in the middle of the streets, tweaking in public parks and park benches. A total disaster. Completely controlled by Democrats. Looking at some headlines from over the weekend, 2 people shot within 60 seconds of each other in 2 different areas of Charlotte, completely controlled by Democrats. More violence in Raleigh and Durham over the weekend, completely controlled by Democrats. It's so interesting that it's the Republican Party that has to accept the sins of violence in our community when all of this violence is happening in areas where Republicans have no say, where there is no Republican mayor, there is no Republican city council, there is no Republican county commission. It doesn't exist. So maybe it's the Democrat Party that should take a look at why there is so much violence in the communities that they control. These aren't GOP strongholds where mass shootings are taking place like we're seeing in Asheville. These are not GOP strongholds like the city of Charlotte, where every single morning I wake up and see another headline about somebody being shot. I mean, it's literally every single day. There is not a more progressive area in the state of North Carolina than Charlotte. But it's the Republicans' fault? It's Phil Berger and Destin Hall's fault that there's people shooting each other consistently, constant gang violence in Charlotte? Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But again, facts are a pretty tough thing there for the Democrat Party. The governor and Josh Stein continued in his commentary claiming that he needs more power. He wants to increase his veto power across the state. It's the first time I've heard this from him. Take a listen.
We need to strengthen my veto power.
Yes.
And we will do that when we elect more Democrats to the North Carolina General Assembly. Unfortunately, no matter how strong my veto is, as Justice Riggs and Justice Earls know well, the Constitution does not authorize me to veto redistricting legislation. And late last year, President Trump directed the Republican leaders in the General Assembly to enact another extreme gerrymander. And they just rolled over to do what he said, abusing their power to take away yours.
Well, the Democrats took that map to court and they have lost. It's not an abuse of power. The state constitution is very clear that it is the sole, this is directly from the constitution of the state, which, I support, maybe the governor does not, the sole discretion of the North Carolina General Assembly to draw maps. And so the governor is correct when he says he does not have the ability to do anything. That is the case. That is the Constitution. The Democrats could have changed that at any point during the more than 100 years that they had control of the North Carolina General Assembly prior to 2010. Same thing with the veto. It was Roy Cooper, in large part, when he was in the North Carolina General Assembly as a member of the Senate, that instituted the weak governor veto that we have here in North Carolina. Yeah, I thought North Carolina was a bright spot for Democrats. Meanwhile, the governor's had 14 vetoes overridden just this biennium session. He did not have the ability to veto maps. That's the bright spot that the Democrats are clamoring for, that they're fighting tooth and nail for. So the governor needs more veto power. And you just heard him. When we control the legislature, it's not going to happen this election cycle. Will it happen again at some point? Probably. Things change, dynamics change, elections change, but there is no shot that the Democrat Party is going to gain a majority in the North Carolina General Assembly this year. And so you'll see more vetoes as we head into the next legislative session, and likely more veto overrides, which is something that has become a very common thing for Democrat governors to deal with here in North Carolina. These issues that they veto, these pieces of legislation that they don't want to sign, are very popular. And that has forced Republican lawmakers time and time again to gavel back in and override those vetoes, notwithstanding the governor's veto. That's what the legislation ends up reading and saying after the General Assembly comes back and does the job of the people of North Carolina. Controversial legislation like requiring sheriffs across the state of North Carolina to cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement. That's legislation that the Democrat governor and Josh Stein vetoed, and the Republican-led General Assembly, including Democrats, also overrode. That's the awful, evil, terrible legislation that the governor is talking about. We'll hear more from him coming up in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to tell you about the law group here in Wilmington, to thank Melissa Gott and her team for their continued support of the program, and remind you that when legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the law group. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across Eastern North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, no matter the issue, the law group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures that your questions are answered and any issues that are popping up, any issues that you're dealing with, are resolved promptly. Great news, folks. They're located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate Melissa Gott and the team over at the Law Group for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. We'll grab a quick break. More from Democrat Governor Josh Stein. We'll also hear from everybody's favorite Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, as the Nick Craig Show continues on this Monday, streaming live, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Monday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. I suffered through more than 2 hours of the North Carolina Democrats Party annual Unity Rally, Unity Gathering, their big fundraiser gala that took place Saturday night at the Raleigh Convention Center. So you didn't have to. Long and short of the event, relatively sleepy. All of the speakers really didn't bring a whole lot. It was the same old kind of sorry talking points, which I guess you kind of expect in some way. But the interesting thing from my vantage point was, in a year when the Democrats seemingly should have so much in moving in their direction, the wind should be very clearly pushing their sail forward, that didn't really seem like that. And so that was kind of an interesting dynamic. Now, what that means moving forward, I don't really know. But it was interesting that the event just frankly wasn't really that interesting. I was expecting to pull 20 or 30 clips from a more than 2-hour event. And when it was all said and done, I have 9 clips, 7 of them being from the current Democrat governor and Josh Stein, a couple from the keynote speaker, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas up there from Massachusetts. I didn't even bother pulling a single clip from Roy Cooper because he didn't say anything interesting. Got up there claiming the same thing, that he's, fighting man for the people, 40 years in public service. Michael Watley is a big oil money lobbyist who's just trying to enrich himself. I mean, it's nothing new. It's the same garbage that Roy Cooper's been spewing for months. It really just was not that interesting for those that are in the political know here in North Carolina. All right, back to Governor Josh Stein. He claims that these are some dark times, which is interesting because he already claimed, as you heard the clip prior, that North Carolina was a bright spot in 2024. So it's a bright spot, but it's now also a dark time. Interesting commentary.
At the federal level, as we will soon hear from Senator Warren, we are living through unprecedented chaos, a costly war of choice without clear objectives or an exit strategy. Costly inflation, $1 trillion, trillion with a T, $1 trillion cut to Medicaid to finance tax cuts for wealthy people. Masked paramilitary federal troops dispatched to cities like Charlotte, like Chicago, like Minneapolis, where they are neither wanted nor needed.
Sure, not needed, definitely.
For those of us who believe in the possibility of government of, by, and for people, these are difficult and discouraging days. But we cannot give in or give up. That is what they want. We must stay in the fight. We must push back. We must build something better right here, a safer, stronger North Carolina.
The issues that the governor there highlighting, he is once again, like the Democrat Party, typically on the wrong side of history with this stuff. The evidence and the data and the polling backs it all up, all $1 billion cuts here and tax cuts for the wealthy and the rich, so on and so forth. That's why I said it was boring. It's the same sorry talking points. Elizabeth Warren has been talking about tax cuts for the rich for like 30 years. There's nothing interesting there. You hear it from these same cast of characters all the time. It's just boring, frankly. I watch a lot of political commentary. I listen to a lot of these events. I watch a lot of political speeches and a lot of political campaigns. It's the same garbage over and over again, and it's just not that interesting. The governor did, however, highlight something beneficial in North Carolina. Teacher pay, that was a big part of the state budget, but of course, as a typical Democrat, it didn't go far enough. Surprise, surprise.
A stronger North Carolina opens up doors of opportunities for our students with excellent public schools. The number one in-school factor for student learning is the teacher standing in the classroom. It is long past time that North Carolina's teachers got a real pay raise. And I was proud to sign that long overdue state budget into law because it included the largest starting teacher pay raise in 50 years, the largest overall pay raise for teachers in 20 years. It was a big step forward, but friends, it was only a step. Because even with those pay increases, North Carolina teacher pay is still 40th in the nation. Unacceptable.
Unacceptable. Not good enough. Never gonna be. Meanwhile, prior to 2010, the Democrats had controlled the North Carolina General Assembly for the better part of 100 years. So if they were so worried about teacher pay, as you constantly hear them complaining and griping about, well, maybe the Democrats should have done something prior to 2010 when they controlled the legislature and the governor's mansion. In probably the most interesting clip of the evening, the Democrat governor and Josh Stein took pretty serious aim at State Auditor Dave Bolek. Take a listen to this.
Y'all will recall that before I was even sworn in as governor, the Republican General Assembly stripped me of oversight over the state's elections administration, giving it to the Republican State Auditor, Dave Bolek. We are now seeing alarming partisan activity out of the state auditor's office and the state board of elections. The auditor's office pressured local boards of elections to eliminate Sunday voting and remove early voting sites from college campuses. They're trying to make it harder for folks to vote and easier for them to throw out votes after the fact on a partisan basis. But you want to know how they cannot steal an election? When we turn out in droves and kick their tails.
Yippee-ki-yay. There's Democrat Governor Josh Stein for the second time in his speech talking about an election being stolen. And again, I find this absolutely fascinating. For more than a decade now, if you as a conservative, you as a Republican, you as somebody that leans right of center, brought up concerns about election integrity, brought up concerns about problems within our election system, For example, states and places like Los Angeles and California. We just watched the shenanigans unfold there back just a couple of months ago. You were a crazy, radical, right-wing conspiracy theory. You have been told by Democrats that elections are safe and secure, that there is no way to rig an election, there is no way to steal an election. Everything is chugging along at 100%, no problems whatsoever. That is the line and the stance that the Democrat Party now has had for the better part of a decade. You go back to the 2020 election, where the president and Donald Trump consistently claims that the election was stolen from him. Democrats say impossible, literally impossible. There's no way that that can happen. It does not exist. It could not exist. It never will exist. That is the stance that they have taken since the 2020 election. Now you've got, in this case, the Democrat governor in North Carolina, Josh Stein, claiming twice within the span of less than 10 minutes that Republicans are attempting to steal elections, and that State Auditor Dave Bolek and his group of cronies are going to steal the 2026 election. I am here to tell you that those two things cannot exist at the same time. You can't claim for a decade that elections are safe and secure and there's no way to rig them and there's no way to steal them, and then turn around just months later and claim, well, folks, if we're not careful, if we don't show up in droves, these evil, awful, terrible Republicans are going to steal the election. Those two things literally cannot exist in the same universe at the same time. This is another problem of its own making from the Democrat Party. Anytime I hear a Democrat open their mouth and talk about an election being stolen or as anything as it relates to election integrity or security, I don't even listen. It's in one ear, out the other, because their stance has been so consistent for the last decade that this stuff is literally impossible. You've got to pick a lane here. Either elections are safe and secure or they're rigged. You have to pick one. You can't straddle the line between these two issues. They literally cannot exist at the same time. Fascinating to hear that from Democrat Governor Josh Stein as he's ratcheting up the pressure on arguably who I would consider the most effective Republican in the state of North Carolina right now in Dave Bolek, who's done an absolutely phenomenal job in the auditor's office just a couple of weeks ago, exposing total corruption in the city of Cary, exposing DOT projects where tens of millions of dollars have been spent and nothing to show for it. He has done a phenomenal job. He's joined us here on the program a couple of times. Now, the Democrat governor is taking aim at him. That's going to be a fascinating thing to watch play out. Dave Bolek is a powerhouse right now in North Carolina politics. That's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Just doesn't make any sense to me. You can't bear down on this issue of election integrity if you're a Democrat and claim that Republicans, specifically Dave Bolek and the GOP, are able to steal an election from you with everything you've been saying for the last decade. It makes no freaking sense whatsoever. It is totally disconnected from the stance of the Democrat Party. In rounding out our recap of the North Carolina Democrat Party's Unity Dinner fundraiser that took place in Raleigh on Saturday, we're hearing from Josh Stein, who really was the only one that had anything interesting to say during the event. He closed by what this year is going to look like for Democrats across the state.
So, friends, we have a lot of work to do over the next 3 months because all of the issues I was just talking about and more are on the line this November. We have to win more elections this fall. The time to prepare is now, so let's do it. Let's get to work. Let's choose hope over hate, decency over division, competence over chaos. Let's elect more Democrats to the United States and North Carolina state houses of representatives. Let's put more Democrats into the state Senate and break the supermajority. Let's re-elect Justice Anita Earls to the North Carolina Supreme Court. Let's put Roy Cooper into the United States Senate. Thank you all so much. God bless you for all that you are going to do over the next 3 months. Have a great night.
No, God bless the state of North Carolina, of which you're the governor of. Guess that didn't make it into the speech. Didn't make it into the commentary there from Josh Stein. Yeah, let's go out there and make sure that Republicans don't have a supermajority in the Senate, just to really hone in on the miserable situation that Democrats are in here in North Carolina. Winning a majority in the Senate, North Carolina Senate, is not even a possibility. So their winning strategy is breaking the supermajority. I mean, that goes to show you what a miserable state the Democrat Party is here in the state. We're gonna show you all of these things. We're gonna choose kindness over chaos. We're gonna show decency over corruption, or whatever stupid things he went through. It's ridiculous. And surprisingly, Josh Stein, who has been one of the more mild Democrats, all things considered, had the most impassioned, fiery speech at this dinner in Raleigh on Saturday. All right, let's transition over to the keynote speaker of the event. Let's check in with U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, the Democrat from Massachusetts, aptly named Pocahontas, who has been singing off the same sheet of music now for the better part of 30 years. She says that she and her Democrat colleagues in Washington, D.C. are fighting Donald Trump and fighting the Republicans on two different fronts.
And we need him because these are not normal times. In Washington, we are fighting the Republicans really on two fronts: costs and corruption. Now, back when he ran for president, 2024, Donald Trump promised he would lower costs on day one. Those were his words. You remember that. Said it almost every day. All right, newsflash, it is day 558, and costs are up. You help me here. Cost of groceries, up. Cost of utilities, up. Cost of health care, up. Cost of gasoline, up. Cost of pretty much everything you need to buy, up, up, up.
Up, 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 up. Fighting the front on two fronts here. We're going after costs and we're going after corruption within the administration. Let's tackle the costs things here first for a second. I, as a conservative, I, as a Republican, as somebody that has been a constant supporter of President Donald Trump and remains a supporter of him right now, I have no problem admitting, and I've discussed it on this very program, that there is in fact an affordability and a price issue under this administration, that they have fallen short on their goal and their objective. I have no problem saying that. I also made the same claims when Joe Biden was in the Oval Office and prices were out of control under his watch, 9.5% inflation in the summer of 2022. I am not interested in being lectured by any Democrat, Elizabeth Warren, Josh Stein, Roy Cooper, or anyone about prices. There's a key difference between those on the political left and the political right. People like Elizabeth Warren covered for the Joe Biden administration, covered for Democrats when inflation and prices were out of control. And because she did that, she is no longer an individual that can complain about it under this administration, because she has proven that she is not an equal opportunity offender. She will cover for the Democrats and bash the Republicans. I bashed the Biden administration for prices, and I've bashed the Trump administration for prices. You can claim whatever you want about me. I see the comments every day on Twitter. I get the emails, so on and so forth, about how I'm just a partisan hack and a bootlicker for the GOP. Did you hear a single Democrat during the 2022 and 2023 talking about how prices were a problem? No. I'm not even sure Democrats could spell the word affordability during that period of time. And now they're going to lecture you, lecture me, and lecture the Republican on price, and the Republicans on prices. I'm not interested in it. You guys are not equal opportunity offenders. You are unwilling to call out your own party when you have these problems. I'm willing to do that. I have no problem sitting here, as I've done for months now, and say that this administration has got to get the war under control to lower the price of gas because it is absolutely killing the American middle class. I've said that for months. I will continue to state that when it is relevant and comes up in conversation. I'm not afraid of that. That doesn't mean that I hate Trump. That doesn't mean that I've turned in my conservative card or turned in my GOP card. I can look at a situation, make an observation, and say more has to be done here. Elizabeth Warren cannot say that. The vast majority of the Democrat Party cannot say that. And so now they're going to lecture you and lecture the American people on prices. Give me a freaking break. I'm not interested in the Democrats telling me about prices. We know how they govern. We know how they operate. Tax and spend, raise taxes, spend more money than ever. They will do nothing to lower prices. You remember the aptly named Inflation Reduction Act during the Biden administration? Inflation wasn't reduced at all. Government spending ballooned out of control. Here's Elizabeth Warren on corruption.
Costs are up. And at the same time, the Trump administration, boy, they put the capital C in corruption. Let's call it for what it is. Donald Trump is literally the most corrupt president in American history. And it is our job to fight back. Yeah. Look, Trump's corruption is not subtle. He doesn't even try to hide it. It's just right out there for everybody to see and to pay for.
Yeah, did you guys see the story over the weekend that Donald Trump's son got a huge contract from a Ukrainian oil company known as Burisma? Did you guys see that? Oh, wait. That wasn't Donald Trump's son. That was Joe Biden's son in Hunter Biden when his daddy was the vice president of the United States. The corruption under the Trump administration. Really? That's the tack that you're going to take with the Hunter Biden laptop scandal and all of that information not only coming to light, but being proven 100% verifiable months and years later? It's insane. Corruption is what you're going to nail Donald Trump on? There's a million things that you can levy against this administration. I don't really think that corruption is a good idea. Again, especially with what has come to light over the last couple of years with Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. Joe Biden's crack-smoking son, Hunter Biden, the degenerate loser that he is, received more than $1 million a year contracting for an oil company in Ukraine of which he had no experience. Why did he get the job? Because his daddy was the vice president of the United States and could influence policy. And I have to listen to Pocahontas lecture me about corruption and accountability. She was an awful keynote speaker. The event was frankly boring as hell, and I don't know what that means for the Democrat Party going forward. We'll keep an eye on it as we continue this sprint towards November. And that's really kind of the long and the short of it. When I knew this event was happening, planned my weekend, I said, all right, it's going to take a long time. I'm going to have to go through and cut a bunch of clips. And as I got through the first 45 minutes of this thing, I was like, God, this is just boring as shit. This is awful. And it just went on and on and on. And thank God for Governor Josh Stein being the only one to say anything rather interesting, taking a couple of shots at Republicans, because the whole rest of the event, frankly, sucked. So that was the Democrat Unity Dinner in Raleigh over the weekend, touting affordability, touting corruption that is taking place within this administration. We'll see if some of these talking points, if some of these issues are enough to drive them to electoral success coming up here. Early voting begins mid-October. Election day, obviously, early November here across the state of North Carolina. We'll have the most extensive and complete election coverage right here on the Nick Craig Show. For those that are watching and or listening, don't forget to share the program with your friends, especially as we get closer to this election cycle. We'll be diving into all of the details in great detail right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, that's going to do it for a Monday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. LawGroupNC.com or 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app. And heard weeknights 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy your Monday. We'll do it again tomorrow right here on The Nick Craig Show.